All right. Well, this is Travis Rogers. Appreciate you guys joining our integration program. I'm excited to get this kicked off. This is really the intro call to you know, how you get access to the repositories, how we've gone about developing the integration, and Martin, who's the developer of this, is online with us to answer any questions and kind of walk you through it. So, Martin, I'm going to turn it over to you, and if you want to take over as the host and share your screen, I'm going to make you the host here, and you can go ahead and kind of explain, now that these guys have access to the code repositories, you know, what they need to do next to really get this started, and maybe a little bit more information about where all the documentation is, and kind of walk them through step by step as they get started on this. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, so this project, the RecordLinc Sync, is a C# desktop application, and this desktop application is executed as a service on the practice management systems server. And what we do is it is plugin driven. And so what happens is that you'll install this software on a, say, a Dentrix practice or an Opendental practices server. And when you do so, it's going to ask you some information to synchronize between the local database and the web service database. And that web service database needs to have a couple of presuppositions about the database before you kind of begin. And that's all kind of handled through our login process currently. But what we do is that for every unique installation of Dentrix or Opendental, Dentrix Enterprise, or Egalesoft, each one of those, every database has its own set of patients, and every database may contain multiple locations. And so what we do is that we ask that you set up your system in such a way that you can have a hierarchical login concept, so that when you go to log into a system, when you log in, you can log in as the individual practice or location, or as the, so to speak, the parent company. And that allows us, at least from this API standpoint anyways, a means of collecting the available locations such that we can map them to the database or databases within the practice management system. And that way, when we send up data to the web service, all that data comes up as and uses a key that you decide for us what it should be. And so let me actually share my screen here, and I'll show you a little bit of the code here, and we'll get a little bit deeper into the actual contents here. All right, I'm going to shrink my screen up here so you guys can probably see it a little bit better.
We can see it now.
Okay. And so, all right, I'll just shrink it up a little bit there. Can you guys see that all right?
Yes, we can see it.
All right. So, oops. All right. Anyway, so one of the things that you'll find in this system, so number one is we actually have out here, so this is just the RecordLinc solution file. We have this README file that goes along with it. We've got a couple of short steps here. This is about how to pull down the source code and compile it for the first time. In your guys' integration, are you going to be using this for Dentrix or another practice management
Maybe you
system?
don't want to go on my computer.
We will use for Dentrix, Opendental, and Egalesoft. But also,
Okay.
Travis, you mentioned that we will not need a C# developer, so we don't have means of compiling it. We would need to have an executable somehow.
Okay. So if you need us to compile it for you, then I'm going to need you guys to gather for me a couple of things. And the main things that I'll need from you is that you guys need a publicly available certificate file. So this is like a SSL, but certificate, but it's a code signing certificate. And I'll need to have that PFX and the associated password that goes along with that, so that I can sign
George,
an
is that something? George, is this something that I should be asking Zach or Phil to do, or this is something you can do?
I don't exactly know what that is. So if Zach and or Phil can do it, I would leave it to them.
Okay, so this is it PFX? What's that? Is it like?
So
Is
it's
that like an SSL certificate?
well, this is a file that's associated specifically with certificates and code signing through the Microsoft code signing techniques. So this PFX
We are
file,
not familiar with Microsoft development, so you'll need to explain this to us, please.
right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's very similar to an SSL certificate, but the difference is that it is, you would need to, basically this is just something you purchase. Right? This is something you would purchase from somebody like DigiCert, GoDaddy, or something along those lines, and then they would provide.
Okay.
Okay.
So what do we ask of GoDaddy, for example?
So if you were to go to GoDaddy, you would go in and where you can find your SSL certificates. When you say you want a certificate, you can say, I want a code signing certificate. And when you do so, they will produce a different output for you. And that will be this PFX file.
Okay. Thanks.
That actually,
okay. I can look into that.
Let me open up a web page here.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so there's some good instructions out here for it. This actually has the direct steps on exactly what you would need to do in order to set up and request a code signing certificate.
Okay.
So
you will need a PFX file from us and a password, right?
Yes, or that PFX. So you decide the password for the PFX. And so once you've got that, and since you're not going to compile the code, you want me to compile it for you, then I'll need this available to me so that I can sign your project accordingly. Okay.
Okay.
The next steps for Dentrix specifically, let me jump back to the front here. For Dentrix specifically, you have to join their partner program. And as part of joining their partner program, they'll provide you two files, which is a user key and a create user. So once you have secured those from Dentrix, again, you'll have to supply those to me so that I can compile them inside of your application. And then finally, for Egalesoft, once you have joined their API and you have your integration key for them as well, I'll need a text file or just the key. It's a, view it kind of like a SHA hash. It's just a encrypted string. And if you can get that to me, then I can compile that into your application for Egalesoft as well.
So will there be 3 compiled applications? Or one?
So you'll actually get 3 separate compiled applications. You'll get one specifically for Dentrix, you'll get one for Opendental, and you'll get one for Egalesoft.
Okay. Question on Egalesoft, by the way. So when we spoke with Dentrix, as we were just signing the contract with them, they were very much familiar with you guys, and they liked the fact that we are working with you. What about Egalesoft? I believe when we signed up with them, they were talking about some certification program and stuff like that. Is there something that we can fast forward with them through you?
Well, and that said, we already are certified with them.
You are certified with them, so that should. Okay.
Michael, I'll introduce you to Eric Peterson, who runs the developer program for Egalesoft, and get you into the same access.
Okay, so I've dealt with him. That's whom I worked with to get the contract going. So basically, you're saying I can just reach out to him and mention that we will be working with you and that we need this Egalesoft integration key, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so once we have each one of these pieces of extra information, then I can go ahead and I can compile the application, and we can get you certified properly through Dentrix and finish that process for you. And once that has all been completed and we've got all these files, then I can compile the source code and so on to get you going. So if I step backwards here and we start looking at the source code for the project, one of the things you'll notice in this project is, oops, wrong. Nope, that's the right one. Okay, so inside of our service runner, this is effectively the inner core of the project, right? So this one file represents a significant portion of the overall project. So we use Log4net runner, or Log4net to do all of our logging. So anytime that you're expecting any sort of errors or otherwise, you can go and check our log file. It's always produced in the Windows temp directory or the user's temp directory if you're running the application as a user instead of as system. What this is going to do is this is going to determine the plugin type that is currently targeted, and it will then load that specific plugin and start up the system. And the way this largely works is by when the system starts, it sets up a timer and it kicks off, and that timer by default is set for 10 minutes. So this is the initial timer ticking, and what happens is each time it restarts, it actually will reassign its time so that every time it runs, it will always have the most current information, so to speak. So if you change your sync time from being from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, or maybe you don't care about getting the information on that quick of an interval, you can up it to 30 minutes or even an hour. You know, you can adjust that time. It's just stored inside of our config file. And so this do sync method is where the brunt of the data is actually done, and it's just done through this little tiny loop right here. But basically we go in and we identify the data types that need to sync, and then we'll loop over each one of those data types and we'll issue a do table sync, which does the remainder of the work. So this determines the actual type object, and it hands it off to our backend side where we actually do our sync. And this is, the way this largely works is that for each data type, we will go to the practice management system, we'll query it, and say, number one, when was the last time we did sync? So this is stored in our own local database. When was the last time we did sync? All of our times are in UTC to ensure that there's no translational error coming from or going to the practice management system. So everything is always expected in UTC dates. And what we do is we identify the date and time of the last sync. We identify if there were any records that had been flagged as failed to sync. So when we send up a record to you through your web API endpoint, that can send me a response, and I'll get you an example of that. Locate the shortcut link here real quick. So anyways, this particular thing lays out the web API and what expected inputs and outputs from it we expect. So in the case of patient, so it's going to be down here in the rewards API. So we've got like update or add patient, these functions, and there is a list of these that are actually targeted inside of the source code. So let me jump back there real briefly and point you to the specific source code file that's going to be most helpful to you in that regard.
Well, you mentioned update method. So if so you're saying that obviously through your application we can write back into the PMS, right?
Yes, if your permission dictates that you can. So for example, when you sign up with Dentrix, you're only allowed certain permissions against the database.
Right.
And so you might have read-only access, or you might have some write back based upon that. And so we have the ability, the code is already written to be able to support all that functionality if your key supports it. Now, like
otherwise, what will happen if we don't? Is it going to be an error message?
Yeah, so what would happen is that you would do the attempt and you would get an error message back at the web service indicating that you don't have permission. And that message comes directly from Dentrix or whomever. Now that said, we do have write-back capability to Opendental. So we have the ability to write back both just general procedures as well as appointments. I don't think we've implemented payments yet, but conceptually it's also possible without, or with a little bit more work. But long of short, depending upon the practice management system, we've got limited capability depending upon those. But the engine itself is capable of handing the message through to each practice management system, and it is dependent upon that practice management system to either allow it or deny it. And that said, we have to write a separate method for each practice management system because every one of them wants to do it differently. And so that is what our plugin is driven to do, is that each plugin has a method specific to the write-back method of that. But between that plugin and RecordLinc Sync, that method is common. So we always have a common communication method between the syncer and the plugin, but that plugin is responsible for disseminating that information into the practice management system accordingly.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So what I'm looking at here is the configuration loader CS file. This is in RecordLinc Common. This has the path to all the URLs that we are going to invoke from the local sync engine. And so if, so this is another item I will need from you guys at some point, is the path to this on your system, right? So each one of these endpoints, so we have just a general, this is the server it's going to go to, and then we have, this is the module path, and then within that module path we have the endpoint path in order to target. And so in this case, add patient is used for both inserting and or updating patient objects on the cloud. So we will send a patient payload to this, and then this API endpoint. So let me go ahead and pull up that endpoint in our documentation. Let me go back one more and we'll go to just adaptation here. So here we are. And so inside of this, you can see all the different payload inputs, and here's some example inputs that you would need to accept at your web server in order to accept this data into your cloud database. So there's example structures of what will be sent, and then down below, there is the expected response that we should expect. So it has it in both JSON and in XML. However, the application will only ever send JSON and will only expect responses in JSON. So we do not expect any XML formats.
Okay, yeah.
So this is the expected response format, and this response is common among all the objects for upload. And the way this works is this is a standard content header, effectively. So this is an object that is part of the return, and then we always expect these 3 messages no matter what in every single response object. The success is just that status code will actually be your 400 or 200 or whatever. And then the message is whatever you want that to be. Now the result is optional, but it allows you to say, I want to accept 99 of 100 records, right? And so if you want to do that, if you give me a response result and that result has a list of inserted records and a list of not inserted records, then you can tell me that 1 or more records had failed to upload or save into your database or couldn't be accepted for some reason in your database, in which case the local sync client will resend that information at the next convenience. And so this is a way for you to be able to inform me that this specific record failed to upload, and therefore I can know that I need to resend it. And that's within the local sync engine. So if you don't want to use that, then I assume the whole batch by the status code was successful or not successful. So if you send me back a status code of 200, then I know that all the records were submitted and accepted into the cloud database successfully. So I'll assume that entire batch of records was successful. Now that said, again, this is sent by batch. I guess I don't recall if I stated that previously, but you can specify the size of the batch of records that comes to the cloud in one send. So traditionally, I think we've got this set at 50 or 100 records. That is another setting that's available here in the configuration. There is a field here for batch size. It might just be up here at the top, but yeah, so it's 200 by default. And we can override this with a settings file, and you can adjust that if you're getting too much input and your servers are having a hard time keeping up with it, then we can adjust that accordingly. So that's kind of the way the engine works, is we will go out to the practice management system and we'll query it. And from that query, that is going to give us a, data load, and we're going to take that data load and we're going to massage it so that it matches between all practice management systems. And then we're going to take that and send it to these endpoints. And then you'll send us back a status code as to whether it was successful or not accepted on your side. And then depending upon that, I'll retry or stop sending that record. Now, in the event that you actually do need to send us more, or say, for example, you only want data within the past 2 years and nothing any further back, or, for example, you've determined that the data at the web service has somehow gotten out of sync and you need to reissue a full sync on the system. In that event, there is an endpoint we call, so let me go back to that configuration loader here. There's an endpoint we call for get sync dates. And this is a means of allowing your web service to override, so it's this function here, this Dentrix sync detail. And what this function does is it returns a list of these same named endpoint objects. So it tells me for this endpoint, for example, or this add insurance payment endpoint, it says this is the last time that data was synced. And so if you send me back a date on this that is null, then I will take that data and I will delete it out of my database and start fresh. So if you hand me back a null, then I know that that means that you want me to start over with that type of data. If you send me back a date that is like a year ago, then I'll delete only the records that in my database indicate they've been modified since the past 1 year. And then I will upload the records again between that time. And so what this allows us to do is this allows you to backdate the sync on the local client if you want. And so that allows you to, like I said, reset the local sync client to resync data. And it allows us to, I mean, that's the main function of it, right? Is if you ever need us to backtrack so that you can clear your cloud database and start over because you don't trust the data for some reason.
And on this endpoint, should you always return the list of endpoints and list of data sets and last time when it was?
So the ideal thing is that only return this data if you actually want to backdate the sync. So traditionally, I would say this result should be null unless you actually specifically want to manipulate that data on the local client.
Okay. Okay.
And if
so
you
if everything is good, we return null.
correct, yeah. And if you do want to send back something, then you'll send back, I think there's an object within this, and then within that object there is a list. I can get you the exacts on that, but that is, let's see, we're going back to here. It's going to be in common, and then sync helper, I think. And then we have the, it's going to be one of these web results. I think it's just sync results, sync detail response. So this is the actual format of that result object that we expect. So that result object, in my case, is going to have, I think that's the wrong one. Sync detail is the standard sync, sync content. I wish that thing would get out of the way.
You just accept this reminder. If you open it, you could close it.
Oh,
yeah.
That's stupid. I like an X on the outside so that I could just move it.
Yeah.
All right, so well, in any case, it's one of these web responses. I'd have to look it up real quick to confirm exactly which one. But each one of these objects, basically, they have this result, and within them they have a content. So in this case, we have this, the result is expected to be a list object in this case, and then that is a method response detail. And I forgot I'm not an actual
sorry, is this somewhere in a documentation or something like this?
There's not any specific documentation of this, but this particular response format out here is there. And what I can do is I can just find an example and send that to you. And if you match the formats and so on that we're sending, then you won't have any problems. But I can certainly break that out for you. So that response object would just be part of this, and I can certainly break out the details of that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So basically, the sync engine is going to query the practice management system. It's going to identify the records that it thinks it needs to upload. It's going to put all of those records into an uploader on my side. And then it's going to asynchronously send you that data from the local sync client in the batch size. So that batch size default is 200. So you'd be receiving 200 records at one time. And again, if you want to change those values, all you have to do is go play with those inside of the config CS. Granted, I guess since you want me to manage that source code, you just need to tell me what you want. But you can also override any of those values by manually modifying your settings file in the live deployment, because all of these settings can be overridden. But what's going to happen is that each data type is gathered from the practice management system in a specific order, and that is done in a synchronous operation. But as soon as one object or syncer has been, or one data type has been finished, then it will start working on the next data type. And if that data type is a small data set, then what will happen is you'll be receiving the first data set in batches, and then you might start receiving the second data set at the web server at approximately the same time. So it is sent to, the system is set to try to fling all that data to the server as fast as possible. And so there's a couple of wait times and so on, and if you need to decrease the times in order to be able to deal with the load, then we can go ahead and adjust those. But we want to, the overall goal of this is to fling that data set from the practice management system up to your server as fast as possible. So, and then again, we maintain a local database, but this local database does not actually contain any PHI or anything along those lines. We do not maintain a duplicate of the record or anything along those lines. The sync system, all it does is it captures a hash of the record that came out of the practice management system, and the identity of that field, as well as the last modified timestamp on that record. And those are basically the only pieces of information we store in our database that sits alongside the practice management. And that allows us to know the content of the database, or rather the last known content of the database, as compared to whatever the current state of the record is. And that allows us to not store PHI outside of the database, but still maintain data integrity as far as ensuring that we are always the most up to date. So I guess, do you guys have any questions for me about how that works, or do you have any deeper questions that I can answer for you?
I don't have anything for now. I think I understood in great lines what it's all about. We'll probably need to digest all this information a bit, look into the code, look into what's in the repository, and we might have some questions later. But for now, I think I understood it.
Great.
But that's where you would connect George and Andre on Slack, right? So you can ask those questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Travis, you're going to send us that recording, I presume, right? So that we can reference this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you guys are all connected on Slack. You guys all have access to the repository. And I'll create a separate channel. I'll add George and Andre, and I will also upload this recording into the channel as well, so you've got access to it.
Yeah, right now only I have access to Slack and the repository, so you will add George and Andre to both, right?
I've added them, yeah. I added George. Yep, I'll add Andre as well.
Super.
Yep.
So,
all right. Well, hey,
so
excited to have you guys a part of this.
So let's say we
Michael.
install it right now. For the sake of discussion, you mentioned that the application can be already compiled and installed for an Opendental client, right? So let's say we install it and it will start sending messages every 10 minutes. And obviously we don't have anything written yet on our end. So all your calls will just go into nowhere, right?
Correct.
And is that okay from your side? Because I would imagine what we would do is we would get 3 compiled copies. We would install it on for certain clients and just have it sitting there and running and attempting to send us data. And in the meantime, we would be developing our web services. And then once we build those, we will start seeing that data. Is that kind of the plan?
That would work. What would happen though is on each one of those clients, their computers are going to continually attempt to send this data to the web service, and then they're all going to consistently fail until that becomes available. But
Correct.
I mean, technically speaking, yes, it would certainly work that way.
Unless you have some different approaches. But to me, this is one thing. And the other thing is, so we would need you to have perhaps another session with our admin team and show them, once let's say you have a compiled version for Dentrix and another one for Egalesoft, another one for Opendental. What's their process to set up this client, right?
Right.
So we would have, when do you suggest we have that session? Perhaps once you have the 3 compiled versions?
Well, we can do that as soon as possible because it's already configured for our stuff. So what you would do is you would simulate what we're doing, right? So if I go out here and I go to recordlinc.com, I can set up and log in as many various users. And so if I log in, I guess this one here is the QA time.
So Michael, I can send you a video on that. I need to run to another meeting myself, but we can send you a video. But yeah, I think the best time to do that, Michael, will be once we get this compiled for you. So once we get your syncers ready, it's an extremely easy process to install. Literally, you just have to remote into the server that you're installing it on. We use Splashtop, which is a HIPAA compliant way to remote in. It's similar to what you probably did with Sika and the other integrations that you've done in the past. So you'll remote in, you'll install the little syncer on their system, and that we create for you. It'll be an MSI file, and then you'll have a user account that's slightly different for Dentrix than for Egalesoft and Opendental. But we'll do 2 things. We'll work with your team when you're ready to do that. We'll train them on that, and then we'll also do some recorded videos and show them how to do that, so they can do it very easily. There is actually a couple recordings on the Dr. DDS Integrate Dental webpage, but again, I think we're jumping ahead, and really at that point, when we want to do that is once we get the installer built for you.
Yeah, and that's it. There are full recordings showing exactly how to run that setup client as it stands and register it. In fact, I think there is one directly available on the main page of the Integrate Dental.
Yep, that's right.
Now, what is this? You're showing us something. What is this?
Oh, this is the RecordLinc UI or interface for the cloud. So this is just how, once you've got a user who can log in with an email and a password, that once they are signed in, then you can configure your quote unquote, this is your locations. So that's what this is indicating. So we've got locations 1 and 2. And then these are the pieces of information. This is effectively that unique key that uniquely identifies this database in your cloud. And so this is part of the data that would be sent back on this rewards API over here for the PMS login.
Okay, I'm a bit confused here.
And this is,
So
yeah, this is, Michael, this is just a sample of how we do it. You would build this into your own product, right? Where you would have your own key that you turn on. So this is not something that you would be accessing per se. This is just how we do it. So he's just showing you an example.
oh, okay. So this
Yeah.
application that you just showed us on the other tab, the integrations and the RecordLinc, that's not our. This whole
No.
thing, we will not need to have any logins and passwords for that, right?
Correct. Yep.
Got it.
And will this keys that will identify the client into our database, will they be put somewhere in that settings XML file or in a configuration?
So this file will get saved down into the configuration file locally on the box. And for every record that is uploaded, depending upon the record, and that actually brings up one good point, is that when the information is uploaded, it comes up in batch. But some practice management systems mix their data. And so like with a Dentrix Enterprise, they have a central database that houses location data for maybe all of their practices. And so because of that, every record has this GUID key tagged specifically on the record. So every record object will have this GUID key as part of it. And the purpose of that is that tells you exactly this is which database this object belongs to.
And this is something that we set it, right?
Correct. This is entirely you. Now, in addition, once you log in for the first time, you'll actually be sending us back an Auth token. And we will use that Auth token to access or send that back to you. So this token here is just an example, but it's just sample string 1. But this is an authorization token that we'll send back to you as a bearer token on every single request after the initial login. And so that way you can ensure your API is secure and that we're only sending data to your targeted API.
So the login will be done once. So we'll have a single token.
Correct.
You'll not refresh it or try to log in again at
No.
each. Okay.
No, because it's run as systems. So there's no user interaction after the initial polling. So in this case, that token is returned and that token, if you ever need to refresh it, you would have to have them double click their desktop icon and log in again, which will reset the token or rather recapture a new token as of that time.
Okay.
So this token is that the same as that GUID?
This is just an authorization token to your web service.
Okay, so this is generated when our admin team installs the client application, correct?
Correct. Well, so let me revise here. So this is we from the local client will call this endpoint, and the endpoint returns the token if a successful login was made. And then from that point forward, I will use that token in all further requests back to the web service. So this is something that your web service will generate and hand back to me on the local client as this field specifically. And then I will take that token and I'll hand it back to you on every future request for every data type and so on as a bearer token in order to authorize me to hand you that PHI data.
Okay, and the authorization on what information should be done?
I mean, that's entirely up to you guys as far as how you want to build that. In this case, I build out the token. I'm sorry, I just return to you the token you handed to me as a bearer token. And that way you can reject any request to these endpoints that is not authorized.
Yeah,
So,
I understand this, but let's say the login part, what will you send to us when we send you back the token?
So this is the example of what we'll send. Specifically, I only send username and password, so these two fields here would not be populated. So in this case, I would hand you a JSON payload with just these two fields, username and password in it.
Okay, and we will set this username and password in our system, and then they will be added to the configuration file.
Using the token.
The user will, okay, the user
Yes.
will use this to log in. So
Correct.
into our system, we generate this username and password. We give them to the practice when they will install the application. They'll put them in the practice, and this is the login. We'll return the token, and then we'll use the token.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll generate that login. You'll provide that to the practice. When they sign up or install this product for the first time, it'll ask them for that username and password. They enter it, and then what happens is the response comes back and has a token inside of it such that they don't have to ever log in again.
But and the token is something that we control as well, right?
Correct. So if you want to expire that token and make it no longer valid, then you can most certainly do so. Any token that you're going to expire, it does not have an automatic refresh method built into it. So in this case, if you expire a token, that office, you'll have to contact them and ask them to log in again. And at which point then it will, they'll receive a new token if they're authorized. If they're not, then their service will just stop sending data to you.
And
now
will
you
the
mentioned
import know where they left off with the data, or will it start to import everything again?
Well, at that point, it would just, I mean, so the sync engine knows its last state, right? So at that point, it would, everything from that point forward would just fail. And so what would happen is that as soon as it had a new authorization or token provided to it, then it would start sending that token with the data on its next cycle. And by default, the system is always going to attempt to resend any failed uploads automatically.
So it will not override this.
Correct.
Okay.
What I'm still not clear is those GUID values, where do those come from?
So that is going to be something you send back to me in the same response. So this Dentrix connector key that it specifies here, that is the GUID response that we want. So in here it just has sample string, but those are generated on your side of the integration. And they are unique for each location within the practice management system. And in this case, I just use that string, whatever it is supplied, and I take that string and I send it with every record that is bound to that specific database.
So it's just any kind of unique key that we generate? Could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, you could just do it as a single integer, or you could use it as a GUID, or, you know, you can use whatever naming schema or whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. It's just a string to me.
So George, I guess this is more kind of like our client ID, right?
Yes, I think so. Basically, I understand that we'll use this GUID to identify the correct client or the correct location.
Exactly. So that's our client ID, because we may have one installation of Dentrix with 2 different practices using it, which to us are 2 different clients. So we would be using 2 different client IDs here, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you would send back one there, and you'd send one back here, one for each location. And then what I would do on the internal side of the syncer is I will keep track of which practice ID within the practice management system was mapped to which GUID. And then I will take every record that reads out of the database and that says it belongs to that specific database or location, and I will map the value back to the GUID before uploading the record. So every single record will have that GUID flag on it that says specifically which database it belongs to in your cloud database.
Okay. All right. Guys, do you have any more questions?
I don't have.
No.
Okay. So, so Martin, let's understand the next steps. Basically, the next steps we will get you those certificate.pfx and password for the code signing certificate. We will also get your user key from an integration key from Dentrix and Egalesoft. That will allow you to create 3 different compiled files for us.
Yep.
Then we can have a session with our admin team where you could train them to
Do the deployment.
install,
Yep.
to do the deployment, right? They will go ahead and do the deployment and install it for several clients, maybe 10 or so, with different practice management systems. And the system will be just sitting there and running and sending and attempting to connect to our web services. That's one side of things. In parallel, George and Andre, you will give them access to this report, to the documentation, and they can start developing the web services on our end, right?
Yep.
Is that kind of the plan?
That I think
George?
is the
Fine.
Yes. Yep.
George, makes sense? Okay, so the documentation, George, do you know where to access it, or you need to be given access to it?
I understand that there's no documentation and we need to look into the repository in the code, right? To see the data structure and the endpoints and what we need to provide. Is this correct?
But what about, what is it that we are just looking at? I thought, is this not a documentation and the samples?
This is the documentation and samples for the web API.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Right here. So, and how would George access this?
This website should be accessible globally. So you can use that address and that should be able to access that API help right now. And I think it is also available on the production. Yeah, it's not available on the production, but if you just hit QA.recordlink in that same address, then that should be available and does have code examples of every function that we call. Now, keep in mind, though, that there's a lot more available in that API help than we utilize within the syncer. And so to know specifically what we access in the syncer, you can go back to the source code, go to common, and then go to this configuration loader. And this configuration loader has every single endpoint that we are going to access listed inside of it. So this is exactly the endpoints that you'll need to implement. Anything that is listed in this file is what will need to be validated.
Okay.
Okay, so George, for you to start writing the code, the web service, you just, apart from you getting access to this bitbucket.org, is there anything else that you need? That you don't have?
I don't think so. I think that's enough for us to start working on it.
Okay, great. So Martin, George and Andre would be able to reach out to you through
Slack, yeah.
Yeah, through Slack with questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Super.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Well, very cool.
All right. Well, hey, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully this is very clear. You know, one thing people have given comments is that our documentation is very clear and we're here to help. So reach out to Martin. I'll create a channel of the 4 of us. If you have any questions, let us know, and excited to have you guys as a part of this, and we'll continue to move it forward. So thanks everybody for your time. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
Have
Bye.
a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.